A powerful skunk-like cannabis is associated with 1 in 4 new cases of psychosis. The findings of the 6-year study suggest strong forms of the Class B drug can lead to serious mental illness. The study looked at 800 people in South London, just over half of whom had suffered psychosis. It found that casual users of the potent form of cannabis had a 3 times higher risk of psychosis. And for those who use it every day, that risk was 5 times higher. Researchers found that almost a quarter of all cases of psychosis could be prevented if no one smoked the stronger skunk-like form of the drug. So, should we legalise cannabis? Would making the drug legal allow its use to be properly regulated? Or does the current classification system prove enough protection and deterrence? Well, to discuss just that, I'm joined by the addiction therapist Sarah Graham and Kate Andrews from the Adam Smith Institute think tank. Welcome to both of you. Kate, the Justice Secretary has said that this study out today underlines the arguments against decriminalisation. Have the results given you any pause for thought?
Frankly, I think the study out today shows us exactly why we need to move to decriminalization at the very, very least. But ideally, I would like to see us go all the way and legalize drugs. The reality is that people are smoking these very high potency forms of marijuana because they can't get their hands on anything else. And they don't know what kinds of drugs they're consuming. When they buy off their dealers, they have no way of regulating what is in that product, how much they're consuming. And if you had a system where people were going to Boots and buying from behind the counter drugs that they knew had different levels of potency and safe levels of potency, you wouldn't see these kinds of issues of psychosis and mental problems developing as quickly, or frankly not often at all. The report today actually said that people who use it passively and smoke lower potency levels of marijuana didn't see these results.
Sarah Graham, that sounds very persuasive, doesn't it? If you did have a regulated system, people would know what they were buying and were less likely to accidentally be taking skunk, which could have damaging effects, potentially.
I'm sorry, that argument doesn't convince me at all. We have stronger strains of cannabis in the coffee shops in Amsterdam, where it's pretty much legal. You can go into a coffee shop and there's a whole menu. The stronger strains have taken over the market there. The stronger strains have taken over the market in the United States, in the areas where it's becoming effectively legal, like Colorado, and where they have medical marijuana, like Los Angeles. You know, I think the argument doesn't really hold much value. In fact, we're seeing a decrease in the use of skunk cannabis by young people and cannabis across the board in this country. And I think actually classification is vital. It's absolutely vital that we give out a strong message that cannabis is a very neurotoxic substance. You know, for young people especially, I really hope every parent will read this piece of research and realise that cannabis is not the drug that they smoked when they were at college. This is the incredible Hulk of cannabis. And parents need to understand that young people are risking permanently damaging their brains, aside from the fact that they're really affecting their schooling.
Kate, to acknowledge those dangers, what do you make about what Sarah Graham has said?
There are dangers to any kind of substance, including alcohol, other kinds of addictions like gambling, that could potentially harm somebody's mind and somebody physically. But it's interesting that you bring up Colorado, because Colorado is in this new innovative process of legalizing marijuana. It's only been legal for about a year. And in Colorado, even just in the past year alone, we've seen violent crime decrease by 2%. We've seen burglaries decrease by 9.5%. And we've seen the amount of fatal traffic accidents relating to substance decrease by 3%. And I know that we're feeling uncomfortable because cannabis is often associated with as a mind-altering substance, which it is, and it makes us feel uncomfortable to talk about drugs in such an open form. But I think that's the way that we're going to get people using less drugs, is if we legalize it, if we put it out there as something that's no longer taboo. Then we put ourselves in a position where we can educate in the way that we educate about safe sex or alcohol.
OK, but what do you do about skunk itself? Do you legalise that as well, given the potential risks?
I would legalise marijuana across the board. And what you would see are pharmaceutical companies and different entrepreneurs coming up with different levels of classification so that people know what they're consuming.
So skunk will get a different kind of classification, but be legal under your ideals?
And of course, I should specify that in my ideals, we're talking about legal, consenting adults purchasing these products. Ideally, somebody who's over 18 years old, but you know, in the States, they might do 21 years old. In the UK, they might decide to do that as well. But we're talking about adults who are making informed choices, no longer having to buy from dealers who aren't classifying these drugs, that they really know what they're putting into their bodies.
And Sarah Graham, I mean, to some extent, the fact that you talk about the dealers as well, would decriminalisation to some extent, take that criminal element out of things?
What we're seeing in Colorado is it's a disaster for young people. The number of young people using cannabis in Colorado is way higher than we have. We're also seeing a massive increase in hospital admissions of young people who are accidentally taking cannabis in food products that's being sold in vending machines. They haven't even begun to tackle the issue of drug driving, because cannabis stays in your system for up to a month, or sometimes longer if you're smoking every day, 6 weeks. That issue hasn't been tackled. The actual congressman or senator in charge of Colorado the governor of Colorado is saying this has been a mistake. I, as an addiction therapist, work with a whole range of addictions at the Hale Clinic, and the majority of people I see historically have been people who are addicted to the two legal drugs, alcohol and tobacco. Alcohol and tobacco are by far the biggest problem drugs we have in this country. And why is that? Because they're freely available and they're socially sanctioned. When a drug becomes a legal drug, it can be marketed, people can lobby for that drug and for the rights of the suppliers of that drug. It becomes a whole different ball game. You know, it's really important that we give out the message to young people that skunk cannabis is actually a really dangerous drug, and that it really messes with their minds, and that parents really seek help, that they don't view this as just a bit of cannabis.
We look at those statistics completely differently, because Colorado has seen a small increase in pot users. It's gone up by about 2%, but it's seen a significantly larger increase in the number of people seeking medical help when they need to, which I would think is a really good thing. And if you just look at the evidence across the board, if you look at countries like Portugal that have decriminalized drugs and made these drugs more accessible, you see that the roughly 50,000 people who are considered to have a drug addiction problem in Portugal at the moment, about 40,000 of them are actually in therapy. They're seeking medical help. The UK cannot boast those numbers. The US cannot boast those numbers. If you have drugs legalized or at least decriminalized, people can seek medical help.
We're running out of time, but a last word then from you, Sarah, to that?
I would really encourage everybody to Google Sarah Graham at the Oxford Union and read what I have to say at the Oxford Union debate, where we swung the students. At first, they were completely pro the idea of ending the drugs war, and they came around to our arguments that actually classification works, it keeps young people safe, and it's very necessary.
OK, Sarah Graham and Kate Andrews, very interesting to debate the issue with you both. Thanks very much indeed.